Hello. So I want to talk about grief and the way grief becomes complicated, specifically in the context of if you're grieving the loss of a relationship with complex PTSD. Thanks for tuning in. So it has been my observation that here are a few reasons why. I'm going to give you 7 reasons why grief is complicated when it comes to complex PTSD. A couple of these overlap with regular grief, but that is neither here nor there. So reason number 1, there's no body, no official death. When you lose a relationship, when you get divorced, there's nothing to bury. The person is still living on the planet. So typically that complicates matters because there's nothing to point to that says this thing has ended. And in fact, I think this might be partly why there's a tendency when people have been narcissistically abused in a relationship of that nature, end up going back to the relationship with the narcissist because the loss maybe isn't necessarily, it's too vague. Is it officially over? I think this is one of the reasons why it's often recommended, or almost always recommended, to go no contact or limited contact with in this kind of scenario, because it's hard to make a break otherwise. But without a body, right? It's the same phenomenon that happens with emotional abuse, emotional psychological abuse versus physical abuse. There are no bruises. It's difficult to say someone was abused when it was emotional psychological abuse that was happening. So similar phenomenon. Same thing happened with many families of Vietnam vets that went missing in action during the Vietnam War. There was no body. Are they really dead? So that complicates things, makes it difficult to grieve in that context. Reason number 2, grief is complicated with complex PTSD, would be that there are limited rituals. This is the nature of the ending of most relationships. Whether it be divorce or just a breakup, there's limited ritual. You have plenty of ritual at the beginning of a relationship. I mean, weddings are huge events with dresses and flowers and parties and food and family coming to town. But at the end, there's no funeral. There's no tombstone that says this relationship ended. It's the absence of ritual can make it difficult and complicate matters. I remember I'm divorced, and I remember getting there was a rubber stamp and an email from a lawyer, and that was the ending. It felt a little bit inept in proportion to my experience. And even my experience in the ending of the relationship, there was this is what we do. Oh. And so that loss of not having rituals, when we have big, huge transitions in our lives, can be something that complicates the grieving of it. I would point to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington National Cemetery. There's this, I think it's a beautiful picture of an attempt to give ritual, give space to the grieving of families that have never gotten a body. Maybe they don't even know what happened. And so there's an unknown soldier in an unknown grave somewhere in the world, and those family members, for them, it's challenging to grieve normally. And so the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier it's a beautiful thing to visit. The guard strolls in front of this tomb 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain or shine, 365 days a year. And it's taken very seriously. And there's a lot of ritual around the marching and the steps, the paces, the cadence of clicking the heels together and cocking the gun and turning the other way and going back. And I think that's it. It gives space to this. So we need such things when it comes to the ending of relationships. Reason number 3, it's complicated, is that the loss is not validated. And in fact, the opposite can be the case if we're talking about complex PTSD and leaving a relationship with a cluster B, with a narcissist, let's say. Not only is the loss of the relationship not validated, but the narcissist often tries to invalidate the experience of the target, the person who leaves them. And so often other people are recruited to abuse by proxy. There's actually a term for it. The people who are recruited in the vernacular, the narcissistic vernacular culture, are termed or deemed flying monkeys, minions, etc. Basically, they carry out the narcissist's agenda, often unknowingly. Why are you leaving him? Why? He's such a great guy. And so there can be further abuse that happens at the hands of people, some of them well-meaning, as they try to fix the scenario that the narcissist has basically manipulated them into fixing because of potentially the sob story or the lies that are told about the target in order to affect the agenda. So that's reason number 3, the grief is complicated. So reason number 4 would be, if in that context, the target ends up having the courage to express grief, sadness, etc., their emotions, then very often those expressions are used against the target as ammunition. So that may be part of the propaganda that is put out there that this person's not stable. See? I worry she might have a nervous breakdown. And thus, right, it's turned against them. So that makes it difficult to express emotions, express grief in particular, because that's being vulnerable. That's, that can be used against you. That's reason number 4. Reason number 5 would be that just the fact that relationships are central to who we are as human beings. So the loss of a relationship we're designed for connection. So the loss of it is quite significant, which can complicate the grieving process. That was reason number 5. Reason number 6 would be that the micro losses can't be predicted accurately. Right? You don't understand, you have no idea how everything ripples outwards, how relationships, I guess this kind of ties into my last point, relationships are so central that the rippling effects, your life being oriented around a particular person, then that can affect everything thereafter. And so that can make it difficult to grieve. Reason number 7 would be that as to why the grief gets complicated would be that it's not merely the loss of what you had that has to be grieved, but also in the case of complex PTSD, it's a grief of what you didn't have. It's a grief of The loss of the future of what you thought you were one day going to have, if you just put in the work, if you just do X, Y, or Z, right? There was going to be something different down the road. And so oftentimes that's a place, as human beings, we put our energy into that. We get through tough, rough spots because you're going to work on yourself, you're going to work on your relationship, and then there's going to be something down the road. But in the case of complex PTSD, as a result of, leaving a relationship with a narcissist, you're not only grieving the actual loss of this person in my life, we did stuff together, but you're grieving what you wanted or needed or hoped that one day they would become, or that the two of you would become in this relationship. And that is huge. That affects us profoundly, because it's almost like a loss of your dreams. And so that can be destabilizing, and the griever is then in a place where they are having to completely reinvent themselves. So that's another piece that makes it complicated. Okay, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to put up another video about ways that we can address some of these factors that are complicating. So stay tuned for that. Appreciate all your support, your likes, etc.